When I was young, my parents would often accuse me of having a one-track mind. Now, I like to think having a one-track mind means I have focus and persistence. But the truth is, it usually meant I was just being stubborn.
No,
That's not it?
no, you got to stay on the rail.
Oh. My one-track mind had to be frustrating for my parents, though. For instance, one time I wanted this new bike, and everything revolved around getting that new bike. My dad asked me where I wanted to go on vacation that summer, and I said, to get a new bike. My room was a mess, not because I hadn't cleaned it, but because I needed a new bike. Now follow my logic. I would be able to mow the yard if I had a new bike. I could get along better with my brothers if I had a new bike. And I'd be an overall better person if I had a new bike. You see, sometimes I can be like a dog with a bone and never let go. Interestingly, Solomon tells us to have a one-track mind in our lives. Not a one-track mind that's selfish, but a one-track mind that views all of life with the same thought in mind. Solomon ends his search for the meaning of life the same way he began. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 8 is the same as Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. His search is now over. He has searched for meaning in every way the world searches, and he has discovered that under the sun, nothing has value. Nothing will last, and nothing is worthwhile. Now, that's not meant to depress us, but to force us to focus. You see, if the things of this world are meaningless, we should not hold too tightly to them. If nothing has lasting value, why should we spend all of our time trying to get it? If nothing in this world will last, why are we so consumed with chasing after it? We've been looking at the book of Ecclesiastes for the last couple of weeks, and every time I have referred to the verse that is our text this morning, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. After spending 11 chapters telling us how meaningless everything is, Solomon finally brings us to the only thing he found that has meaning, the only thing that has value, the only thing that's worthwhile. The one thing we should have a one-track mind for, pursuing God. You know, when a ball club goes through a rough patch and begins to lose a lot of games, the coaches always use the same cliche. They say, we're going to get back to the basics. What does that mean? It means they're going to put aside all the things that distract and take their focus off the game. Or as legendary football coach Vince Lombardi said to his team in the locker room after a rare losing streak, gentlemen, this is a football. Maybe we need to do that at church. Ladies and gentlemen, this is God. Solomon has painted us into a corner. Now, all along in this book, he has teased us, especially he's teased those who ignore the Lord with the fear that nothing has any value, that nothing has any meaning whatsoever. Solomon is trying to make us focus on our purpose in life. Our whole purpose, our whole meaning for existence is simply to fear God and keep His commandments. If we can do that, we'll be living a fulfilled life under the sun. Everything else is extra. To fear God and keep His commands does not make everything fair, nor will we necessarily live happily ever after in this world. But it does give meaning to the meaningless. It allows us to chase something more tangible than the wind, and it makes life worthwhile under the sun. Solomon's conclusion has two parts. As we look at those two parts this morning, let's see how we are to have a one-track mind for God. The first way we have a one-track mind for God is to fear God. To fear God. To fear God does not mean to be afraid of Him. The only ones who need to be afraid of God are those who reject Him as their Heavenly Father. One year, while working at church camp, there was this camper who was really obnoxious. He was disrupting things all the time. So after a chapel service where he was constantly talking and causing trouble, I made him stay so I could talk to him about his attitude. And I tried to reason with him calmly, but he ignored me. In fact, he began to fidget around with something he found on the floor, and he even began to wander around while I was trying to talk to him. And several times I said, "Stop, please," in a controlled and pleasant way. But he wasn't listening. So finally I'd had enough, and in frustration I yelled in my deepest and loudest voice, "I said stop!" And all the other campers who were milling around outside this open-air chapel building froze in fear. "What was that?" they asked. Now, my girls, who were younger than the campers who had come with me for the week of camp, were the only ones who did not flinch. You see, they recognized my voice, and they knew there was nothing to fear. So they kept right on playing, and they said, "Oh, that's just that." You know, God can be terrifying. And make no mistake, the Bible says He will have vengeance, and He will judge the earth. However, as Christians, we don't have to fear His wrath. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, we won't want to run and hide in fear. Rather, we will run toward Him saying, "That's my Heavenly Father." You see, we know that He's our Father, who loves us very much. And He won't hurt us. And when we understand that, we can fear God by holding Him in awe. As Christians, that is how we really fear God, by holding Him in awe. And awe is an emotion filled with wonder. We sometimes forget that emotion because we mistakenly try so hard to control our emotions. And when we do that, we miss out on part of our Christian experience. The Windsor Road Christian Church in Champaign, Illinois, has always been very dear to me. For the longest time, I couldn't figure out why, and assumed it was because we had a lot of friends our age there, or because we owned our own home in that community, or because it was such a good ministry. Now, all those things are true, and they may be part of the reason. However, that was not the real reason. Years after we moved away from there, my brother Dan, who most of you met last year when he was here, was a missionary in Africa, he had visited us a couple times at that church in Illinois, and he referred to the church as the crying church. It seems every time he attended, someone ended up crying about something during the service. Now, it really did not happen every week. I know it didn't. I was there every week. It didn't happen every week, but it was a reflection of the deep emotion people had as they laid their burden at the cross. You don't have to cry every Sunday when you come to church, but do you get emotional when you come to worship? Are you in awe of the God we serve? Sometimes we are too rational, too logical, and therefore too emotionless. We'd rather sit on a cold, hard pew staring at the back of someone's head and maybe catching a quick nap during the sermon instead of laughing, clapping, shedding a tear, and being reminded that our God is an awesome God. To fear God is to hold Him in awe. If we would go to the Grand Canyon, we would not yawn and look at our watch and daydream about something else. We would look at that awesome sight, and we would respond accordingly. If we would do that for creation, why can't we do the same for the Creator? We also fear God by holding Him with respect. May I suggest we do not give God the respect He deserves? Now, by respect, I'm not talking about being quiet in church or not running down the aisle or dressing up on Sunday or not eating food in the sanctuary. Those are all surface and traditional issues that have nothing to do with holding God with respect. Although, from the way I was yelled at as a kid for running in church, you'd think it was part of the Ten Commandments. Rather, we hold God with respect by our attitude. And believe it or not, we can control our attitude. We can control our attitude with preparation. Growing up, we were lucky as a family to get to church 5 minutes late. And we only lived a couple blocks away. The problem wasn't getting to the building. The problem was Mom had 4 boys to get ready every Sunday morning. 4 boys who could be up at the crack of dawn to watch cartoons on Saturday, but were impossible to stir at 9 o'clock on Sunday. And I don't know about my brothers, but I always tried to find an excuse not to go. Usually to no avail. Mom would not hear them. And rare was a Sunday that I did not fight with my brothers on that short ride to the church building. So it's kind of hard to hold God in respect or to hear anything He was trying to say with that kind of attitude. What attitude do we bring to church? Do we come with the attitude of Psalm 122, verse 1, where David said, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord? Or do we come out of obligation or habit? Or do we think about everything else under the sun except God? Except God. There's another way we hold God in respect, and that's by the offering we give. Do we just pull out some loose change or a couple of bills on Sunday morning, or do we give the same amount we gave 20 years ago? Or do we take time before we arrive to sit down, decide what we want to give, and prepare the money to bring? The book of Malachi asks, will we rob God? Robbing or taking something that doesn't belong to you shows a total lack of respect. If God is who He says He is, shouldn't our belief be seen in what we give? Don't just say how much you fear God. Show them. We also fear God by putting Him in His proper place. Putting God in His proper place. God's proper place is not in a box that we pull down and open up for an hour on Sunday. Nor is He to be shelved away until we need Him for something. God's proper place is at the center of all we say and do. And when He's at the center, it will affect how we live. I'll let you come to your own conclusions regarding how you can put God first in His proper place at school or work or in your family. And I encourage you to think about how you can this week. But for a few moments this morning, allow me to take a couple minutes to just reflect on how we put God in His proper place at church. Here's a question. Why does a church remain small? If we hold the only truth and the best news anyone will ever hear, why aren't people flocking here? Now, over the years, I have heard hundreds of reasons and variations of those reasons why, and there are some things that do hinder church growth that we can't control, such as people moving away or people dying. And if you're small to begin with, if that happens just with one family or one person, it really affects everything. Those things, especially in a small church, can be devastating. And they can hinder, slow down, or reverse growth. However, when I talk about a church being small, I'm not talking about numbers. I'm talking about our size. Because that will vary from church to church. Rather, what I'm talking about is spiritual growth and maturity. Simply put, if we do not fear God and hold Him with awe and respect, then God does not have a proper place in our church. And if He doesn't have a proper place in our church, He will not be here. We try to blame the preacher, or our location, or the size and makeup of our community, or the lack of money and or programs, or our facility for the lack of growth. Although those things may play a factor, they're not the reason. They are lame excuses. Kind of like saying, the dog ate my homework. Now I realize not all churches can be, or even should be, mega churches. The real question we need to ask every day is this: is God really the center of all we do here? And you don't have to say a word. It'll be seen by how we act and how we treat each other. You see, this is God's church. It's not my church. It's not the elders' church. It's not anyone else's church. When we behave and do things to please ourselves and not God, we have forgotten whose church this is. It's funny. We usually confuse our wants, desires, and preferences with God's wants, desires, and preferences. And may I suggest that is why you hear about churches fighting. Because we want things done our way. How long do you think God will worship with a congregation that does not fear Him, that does not hold Him in awe? Well, the other way we have a one-track mind is to keep His commandments. We fear God, and then we keep His commandments. And the way we keep His commandments is very simple. We live consistently. We live consistently. We make the mistake of thinking that keeping God's commandments has to do with following the rules and obeying the laws. However, when we try to legislate morality and demand obedience to a cultural list of do's and don'ts, we will always be inconsistent. I know a man who was opposed to alcohol. So he refused to get gas at the local convenience store, although the gas was cheaper there because the store sold beer. However, the same man loved baseball. And several times a year he would go see a Major League Baseball game, ignoring the fact that beer was all around him. He did that because he wanted to do that. It did not look moral when he did not buy the gas at the convenience store. He looked like a hypocrite. The rules and laws are to teach us right from wrong. And to help us understand now notice I said we, not others, that we fall short of God's righteousness. The truth is keeping all the laws and rules of the world will not save you. And you cannot keep all the laws perfectly anyway. You see, it's a reminder that only the blood of Jesus saves you. We should never forget that. So the way we consistently keep His commandments is seen not in making lists and demanding obedience to cultural traditions, but in how we treat other people. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus told us how God will determine if we have kept His commandments. In that chapter, Jesus describes the day of judgment. As I read Matthew 25, verses 43 through 45, notice the reason Jesus gives for sending people away from God. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you? He will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. That's a little different than we normally think, isn't it? That's a little different than keeping certain rules and being a good person. How are we treating other people? There are a lot of commands in the Bible, a lot of rules, and it can be very complicated and very confusing. And in Christians today, we like to add more rules to the list. Rules that are not biblical commands, but they're rather interpretations based on cultural assumptions. One day a teacher of the law asked Jesus, of all the commandments, which is the most important? In other words, which command can I follow that will naturally allow me to understand and obey the rest? Which command is key? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. When we follow that command, we will be consistent. When we love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and strength, we won't argue with Him about if we have to do something or we can get away without doing this, because we'll do everything out of love. And the way we show that is not simply by giving lip service to the words. It's by showing that kind of love to those around us. It's by telling people and showing people by our actions that we really do love Him. When my son J.D. was 4 years old, we took a family vacation to Gatlinburg. And while we were there, we visited Christus Gardens. Now, Christus Gardens is a museum of wax figures illustrating the Bible and the life of Christ. At the end of the tour, you enter a beautiful garden where there's a large stone sculpture of the face of Jesus. The unique thing about this carving is whenever you go in the garden, it appears as if the eyes of Jesus are following you. Now, I knew this sculpture was there since I had been there on a family vacation as a child. So when we got there, I told my kids to look for it when we entered the garden. J.D. was the one who found it first. Later on, talking about our trip, J.D. could not remember the name of the place we went to, so he referred to it as the place I found Jesus. Have you found Jesus this morning? Do you have a one-track mind that's pursuing Him? Do you fear God? Keep His commandments. Let's pray.